and as a nation. That does it for today. We'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report with John Dickerson starts right now.
Welcome to the Daily Report for July 19th, 2024. I'm Jeff Glor, in for John Dickerson. The first named storm of the season. We'll take a look at Alberto's upcoming impact in the Gulf, plus an update on the wildfires in New Mexico, which have turned deadly. And we'll ask when the heat dome across other parts of the country will finally let up. Both sides are hailing a strategic partnership between North Korea and Russia, but nobody's giving details on exactly what it means. The ugly back and forth between President Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as Netanyahu insists the U.S. is withholding weapons. The chipmaker powering artificial intelligence is now the most valuable company in the world, passing Microsoft and Apple. Will mark Juneteenth, the day when word of emancipation reached the last black slaves in Galveston. Plus saying goodbye to the Say Hey Kid, Willie Mays' lasting legacy on and off the field. And it's no lie, a spectacular discovery inside glass bottles in George Washington's cellar. The Daily Report begins right now. Hi, and thanks for joining us. We begin our report with the first named storm of the 2024 hurricane season. Tropical Storm Alberto formed Wednesday over the Gulf of Mexico. Forecasters are expecting heavy rain, strong winds, a storm surge, and flooding. It will make landfall in Mexico Thursday, but the effects are already being felt in parts of Texas. This is video showing the flooding already in Galveston. Tropical storm warnings are in effect across the state, and Governor Greg Abbott has issued a disaster declaration. We are also tracking extreme heat across the country. Some 75 million Americans are under heat warnings or advisories across 17 states. Temperatures in New England climbed into the 90s Wednesday. The heat will later expand to the mid-Atlantic this weekend, where Washington, D.C. could hit 100. We likely won't see temperatures drop until next week. Meanwhile, in New Mexico, a state of emergency has been declared in the wake of two wildfires. The South Fork and Salt fires together have scorched more than 20,000 acres of tribal and government lands. At least one person has died. Thousands of residents have been forced to evacuate, and officials say more than 1,400 structures have burned. For more on Tropical Storm Alberto, CBS News national correspondent Dave Melkoff joins us. Dave, how far away is Alberto now?
Good evening, Jeff, and good evening, everybody at home. That storm, the center of rotation is about 300 miles offshore from us, maybe a little closer because it's just inching towards us. But this really shows you that it doesn't really matter where the center of rotation is. This storm, the outer bands, and one just hit us just a couple seconds ago as you were just tossing to us. These outer bands are not only dumping water on top of us, Jeff, but it's also lapping up all this storm surge. This used to be a street right in the heart of Corpus Christi on North Beach, but now it looks more like a river. You can't even tell where the street stops and the bay begins.
All right, so Dave, after Alberto hits Mexico and then your area, where does it go?
So it goes on to shore, and usually when a storm goes on shore, it doesn't have the energy anymore to make it more powerful. But the energy is coming from right here. And as I feel the water, Jeff, it is 85 or 86 degrees, and that is the sea surface temperature. That's also the battery that runs these storms. The storms actually pick up the energy from the hot ocean or the hot Gulf, and they turn that into the spinning energy. And the hotter the Gulf is, the hotter it becomes, and the more powerful these storms become. We're looking at a very, very powerful hurricane season in the Atlantic, and we're just at the A, Alberto.
Yeah, I've covered plenty of hurricanes, Dave, but I usually think July or August. How early is this?
This is very early, especially when you're thinking of the heat that's out there. And normally we see this type of heat that's in the Gulf in September, in August. But now we're getting this early heating, and the Earth is 70% water, right? But it absorbs 90% of all the global warming heating that is happening all over the Earth is absorbed in the water of the Earth. We thank the oceans for doing that, but it does come with a payoff, and the payoff is actually having this type of very, very powerful storm season, and we're just at the beginning of it. It could be a wild one because not only do we have this, but we have the possible La Nina that is happening out there on the West Coast, and those together are forming what could be a really, really bad season for the folks on the Gulf Coast, in Florida, and all the way up the East Coast. As you know, these storms can pop off and they can go up north as far as New England.
All right, just to start, Dave Melkoff, thank you. Overseas now, leaders of Russia and North Korea signed a mutual defense agreement Wednesday. The two countries have promised to provide aid to one another should they face, quote, aggression from an adversary. The move comes after Russian President Vladimir Putin visited the North Korean capital for the first time in 24 years. CBS News foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tayeb has more on this. Imtiaz?
Well, it really was a chance for Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to really flaunt their friendship, and flaunt they did in front of this massive, carefully choreographed North Korean crowd, which was cheering as they waved flags in Pyongyang's Central Square, which was also dominated by these enormous portraits of Putin and Kim. But it wasn't the over-the-top pomp and circumstance that set alarm bells ringing from Washington to Brussels, Kyiv to Seoul. It was Putin's announcement of what he called a breakthrough new agreement with Kim, which he said provides, among other things, for mutual assistance in the event of aggression faced by one or the other. Now, neither leader of two of the world's most heavily sanctioned nations revealed the exact terms of the agreement, which appears to include a mutual defense pact. Now, this is a pact which really first started to emerge around 18 months ago when Putin, desperate for artillery for his grinding war in Ukraine, turned to Kim for help. Now, Western intelligence officials are warning that what they said just started as a trickle is now a flood, with Moscow expected to receive around 5 million rounds of ammunition and a vast array of North Korean-made ballistic missiles, while Pyongyang will get food and military aid. Now, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said yesterday that the U.S. was, quote, very concerned, and that the fastest way to end the war in Ukraine was for Putin to, and I'm quoting here, be disabused of the notion that he can outlast Ukrainian forces and outlast all of Ukraine's supporters. Jeff.
Imtiaz Tayeb, thank you. A Russian court on Wednesday sentenced a U.S. soldier to nearly 4 years in prison on charges of stealing and threats of murder. U.S. officials say Staff Sergeant Gordon Black flew to Russia to see his girlfriend earlier this year. He was arrested in May after she accused him of stealing money from her. According to Russian state media, Black admitted to the theft because he needed money for a hotel, but he denies making the threats. He plans to appeal the verdict. Russia is holding a number of Americans in its jails, including Marine veteran Paul Whelan and Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich. The State Department is strongly advising American citizens not to go to Russia. The White House canceled a strategic meeting with Israel this week out of frustration with the country's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. U.S. and Israeli officials were supposed to meet Thursday to discuss threats posed by Iran. However, a source familiar tells CBS News the White House canceled the talks after Netanyahu posted a video accusing the Biden administration of withholding weapons. The White House spokesperson said they had no idea what Netanyahu was talking about. Last month, the U.S. paused the shipment of heavy-duty bombs to Israel because of concerns about civilian deaths in Gaza. But the Secretary of State says all other types of weapons and ammunition are still being delivered. Meanwhile, the United Nations Human Rights Office says Israel may have violated the laws of war in Gaza. The office says the Israeli military failed to distinguish between military targets and civilians. Israel calls the assessment factually and legally flawed. Still to come here, the CDC has accepted a new definition for long COVID. We're going to speak to an infectious disease doctor about what prompted the decision to redefine the condition and how it could help those who've been suffering from it. Plus, congressional Democrats hit another hurdle in their effort to enact tougher gun control measures. We'll have more from Capitol Hill next. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Coming up, our series. Wait a minute. Tom, is that you working the camera?
Keep leaning out of your close-up.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That Desired Farm, it's a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Wednesday marked the 4th consecutive year Juneteenth has been celebrated as a federal holiday. It commemorates June 19, 1865, the day 250,000 enslaved black people in Galveston, Texas, learned they were free 2 years after Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. In Dallas, the community celebrated with its annual Miss Opal Lee Walk. It is named after Opal Lee, who is often called the grandmother of Juneteenth, for her efforts to make the day a federally recognized holiday. The walk is a 2.5-mile journey and represents how long it took for the news of freedom to reach Texas. Juneteenth is also known as Freedom Day, Emancipation Day, or America's second Independence Day. It was celebrated unofficially for decades until the Black Lives Matter movement gained power and calls to federalize the holiday grew in the 21st century. Then in 2021, President Biden officially made Juneteenth a federal holiday. Republican senators blocked a Democratic-led attempt Tuesday to pass legislation that would have restored a Trump-era ban on bump stocks. It's an accessory that enables semi-automatic weapons to shoot at a very rapid pace. This comes following the Supreme Court's decision to overturn a ban on the gun accessory last week. The court said that an almost 100-year-old law aimed at banning machine guns cannot legitimately be interpreted to include bump stocks. For more CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland joins us from Washington. Scott, New Mexico Senator Martin Heinrich led the effort to ban bump stocks. Why did this fail?
There was no expectation, Jeff, this thing was going to pass. In a paralyzed Congress that can't even move on easy things, there was no real sense they'd move swiftly on an issue as volatile as gun control or gun rights. But Democrats wanted to have this vote potentially to cue up a message for November that they argue Republicans are extremists on issues involving guns, and that they are better positioned to speak to the larger number of voters. Republicans argued this bump stock bill that was moved swiftly to the floor overreached and would have expanded into areas that they shouldn't have, that would have put a restriction on lawful and rightfully owned equipment that goes with guns. But there's a more fundamental bottom line here, Jeff. This is just the latest chapter in what has been a novel of failure this Congress on anything involving guns. Democrats in the House have tried this whole series of parliamentary techniques to force a vote on gun control. They have secured a sum total of 0 Republican co-sponsors. They are not threading a needle or making headway. In the Senate, the only bill that's being discussed by Republicans is a bill that would walk back a new Biden administration executive order which ordered new background checks on gun show sales and online sales. It has been, Jeff, a lost Congress on the issue of guns.
Yeah, Scott, Democrats are also working on a measure aimed to protect in vitro fertilization and ensure that it's covered under health insurance for federal employees. What's happening there?
Same calculus. It's certain for failure. It already has failed in a test vote last week, but they want to have that message ahead of November that they're supporting IVF and federal protections for contraceptives, both of which were blocked by Republicans, saying the bills were overreaches or moving too swiftly to the floor. This is all queuing up a campaign that Democrats want to focus on firearms, abortion rights, women's reproductive rights, and less on issues that seem to be advantaging Republicans.
Another thing Democrats want to talk about, the House Ethics Committee is expanding its probe against Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz of Florida, who always seems to be in the news. What's the latest there?
A uniquely significant event from the House Ethics Committee, which investigates their own colleagues in the U.S. House for possible misconduct. They put out a public statement that their investigation has expanded into Congressman Gaetz, potentially impacting issues of sexual misconduct, illicit drug use, and obstruction of an investigation. Jeff, the House Ethics Committee rarely even says publicly the sky is blue and water is wet. That they put this statement out there as an indication they're taking this seriously, and that both parties signed off on announcing this expanded investigation. Jeff, our CBS News reporting tonight is that 4 women, according to multiple sources, have informed the committee they were at parties that included sex and drugs that Congressman Gaetz was at too. He has made public statements that are unequivocal. He says he'll be exonerated, that these allegations are from goons trying to smear him.
It would be a wonder if they could agree on whether the sky is blue these days. Maybe that's a question for the debate next week. We'll see if
lead off with that.
Trump and Biden agree on that at least. Scott McFarland, thank you very much. Families of the victims of 2 fatal Boeing 737 MAX crashes are calling on the Justice Department to find the company and hold it criminally responsible for the accidents. In a letter to the DOJ Wednesday, an attorney representing 15 of the families said, quote, because Boeing's crime is the deadliest corporate crime in U.S. history, a maximum fine of more than $24 billion is legally justified and clearly appropriate. In October 2018, all 189 passengers and crew were killed on a Lion Air flight to Indonesia. About 5 months later, another crash killed all 157 people on board an Ethiopian air flight. On Tuesday, Boeing's outgoing president and CEO David Calhoun apologized on Capitol Hill to the relatives of both crashes. Officials in Syracuse, New York, are investigating the cause of a house explosion Tuesday that left 13 people hurt. The fire district chief said Wednesday there are no signs of criminal activity. He also explained the State Department of Public Safety conducted tests in the area to make sure there wasn't a wider safety issue for residents.
Their test was successful. They confirmed there were no issues with their equipment. So that kind of rules out a bunch of questions people had earlier, was this related to construction in the area? Was this related to something with the service going into the house? And we can confirm that that was not the case.
Police believe everyone inside the home at the time of the explosion is accounted for. They're being treated at a local hospital. The National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine has finally given long COVID a universal definition. More than 1,300 experts and researchers contributed to the new definition, which says long COVID is a, quote, infectious associated chronic condition that occurs after a COVID-19 infection and is present for at least 3 months as a continuous, relapsing, and remitting or progressive disease state that affects one or more organ systems. The CDC has accepted this definition. For more, let's bring in infectious disease Dr. Amish Adalja. He's a senior scholar at Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. Haven't spoke to you in a while, but it's good to see you again. And actually, let me just start with that, Doctor. I think a lot of people, this is just anecdotal, but a lot of people out there are saying, I'm done talking about COVID. They don't want to think about it anymore because those years were so rough. Why do you think it's important to remember?
It's important to remember because COVID didn't evaporate. It's still one of our endemic respiratory viruses that's going to continue to infect people, hospitalize people, and even kill people. Even though the bad days of hospitals under crisis is over, this is still going to be a chronic problem, especially because of long COVID. This is kind of one of the long cascading tails to this pandemic. And the other thing is that we need to keep remembering all the mistakes of COVID-19 because we certainly are going to face other infectious disease emergencies in the future.
I gave the sort of long official definition of what they've agreed now long COVID is. Can you put it into simpler terms? What is long COVID?
Long COVID is a condition in which someone who's had COVID has recovered from the acute part of that infection. And now it's 3 months later, and they still have symptoms involving multiple different organ systems, including, for example, being short of breath, having cognitive difficulties, having fatigue, that have persisted past that 3-month window. And what this definition does is it really standardizes what people are talking about, because all of the early long COVID research have been plagued with different definitions, making it very hard to compare things in one study versus another study. And this clear definition kind of gives researchers a green light to start doing more rigorous work and being able to use all of the tools that medicine and biostatistics have to try and unravel the mysteries of this problem and give people some solutions.
Are there still a lot of problems out there with somebody coming to their doctor and saying, listen, I think I have long COVID, and the doctor isn't quite sure what to say or how to figure this out?
That's definitely the case because there's not some blood test that you can do. And long COVID symptoms are something that overlap with many other conditions. So a clinician faced with a patient with possible long COVID has to do a lot of work to really isolate what's causing those symptoms. Is it an undiagnosed other illness? Is it something that's completely not related to COVID, or is this long COVID? That, I think, is still going to take some time. But by having a definition like this, we can start to think about what types of tests, what type of diagnostic criteria can you use to rule other things out and rule long COVID in, and then that puts people on a path to the correct treatment. So it is still challenging because it is a nebulous term with lots of different symptoms that could be from many different causes. There's not one specific symptom from long COVID, and there's not one blood test you can do to confirm long COVID.
Doctor, we didn't talk about this before, and I apologize if you don't know the answer, but do we have any idea how many people suffer from long COVID?
It's in the tens of millions. Long COVID seemed to be much more common in the early days of the pandemic before the vaccine. People who were infected with the original version of this virus, those long COVID numbers are very high. It's become less and less, for example, with the Omicron variant and in individuals who have vaccination. But about 5 to 10% of people who get infected may have long COVID. And we know that this whole country was basically infected. So a percentage like 5 to 10% of a big number is a pretty big number. So this is one of the long tails of this pandemic, as I said.
That is a pretty big number. Okay, Dr. Amish Adalja, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Well, despite the famous myth, George Washington never cut down his father's cherry tree. However, the first president did save dozens of bottles of the fruit. On various archaeological digs at Washington's mansion in Virginia earlier this year, scientists found 35 bottles of perfectly preserved cherries and what are believed to be gooseberries. The principal archaeologist says discovering food that's been preserved so well for so long is unprecedented.
Finding what is essentially fresh fruit 250 years later is pretty spectacular. All the stars sort of have to align in the right manner for that to happen.
It's great. I mean, can you eat it? That's just the cherry on top of the historical finding, though. The Department of Agriculture is now DNA testing the fruit to learn more about the preservation method. They're also taking more than 50 cherry pits from the preserves in an attempt to plant new trees from them, using the seeds from the past to nourish the future. If you're watching this right now, there's a chance it's through an app. We all have dozens of them on our smartphones and even some that track our locations. Coming up, we'll take a deeper look into the app the federal government is using to keep track of migrants in the country. You're streaming The Daily Report.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing or bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else.
This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to the Daily Report. I'm Jeff Glor in for John Dickerson. Here are some additions to our top stories. The first tropical storm of the Atlantic hurricane season has formed over the Gulf of Mexico, named Alberto. Forecasters say the storm could bring heavy rain and high winds to Texas and northeastern Mexico. Parts of South Texas are already seeing rough seas and flooding. Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un signed a new partnership deal during Putin's visit to the country Wednesday. The deal promises mutual aid if either country is attacked. It comes as both nations face ongoing international tensions and sanctions. The The UN Human Rights Office says Israeli forces may have repeatedly violated the laws of war in its war against Hamas in Gaza. The report also accuses forces of failing to distinguish between civilians and militants. Israel pushed back against the report, calling it factually and legally flawed. CBS News polling has shown that voters view immigration at the U.S. southern border as one of the top issues facing the country. To address Americans' concerns, Congress is considering whether to expand programs that monitor migrants. One of them is an app called SmartLink. Tom Hansen got rare access to see how it works and asks if it's effective.
When you see the Capitol dome, what does it mean to you?
Welcome to the United States. It's beautiful.
An entrance into the United States immigration system that started 2 years ago. This migrant from Venezuela was seeking asylum.
The river came up to here. I would feel as though the river was going to pull me under.
He crossed the border, and the state of Texas then bused him to Washington, D.C. While he waits for an immigration court process that can take more than 5 years, he's monitored by the government.
How did that make you feel?
It made me feel like I was being watched. I felt like I was a fugitive on the run.
Instead of putting him in a detention center, Immigration and Customs Enforcement handed him a phone with this app called SmartLink. In 6 years, the app has monitored almost 800,000 people ICE considers lower risk. ICE agent Donovan Wright showed us how it uses facial recognition.
Take my photo.
And GPS to track migrants.
Donovan is on the move. We're going to send request for facial recognition check-in. You can see this red flag popped up, and that means that they have opened the app.
I just received a biometric check-in from my case specialist, so I go to do a check-in.
Oh, and you can see there's now an arrow up there.
The app allows agents to check in with migrants anytime. It also flags important court dates.
So is it part of a solution to an immigration system in this country that so many people think is broken? Well, who better to ask than the guy that oversees the program here at ICE?
Our absconder rate is under 10% for this fiscal year.
Tom Giles considers that a success. For perspective, we asked ICE for the absconder rate before it started SmartLink, but spokespeople didn't get back to us by our deadline. In its own report to Congress, ICE says due to cost, most migrants are eventually phased off the app before their court dates if they're consistently compliant. That means ICE will continue to have challenges reporting on its effectiveness.
Why invest so heavily in something that hasn't been proven?
Our non-detained population has grown over 200%, but really we haven't gotten the resources to effectively manage that docket the way we would like to. But for the cases that are on it, in my belief, it's been effective for us.
They have the right to do it. It's their laws. It's obviously necessary so they know who I am, where I'm from, where I'm located.
Tracking a location as a migrant takes his steps towards citizenship.
And Tom Hansen joins us now. Tom, some people think the app is basically just sort of tracking migrants like a dotted line on a treasure map. Is that the case?
Yeah, you know, there are a lot of misconceptions and myths when it comes to this app, and that's why we wanted to get the access to kind of pull back the curtain and show the American public what this app is all about, because there are so many myths out there. What we found was that the app actually tracks migrants a lot less often than a lot of people out there think. ICE outlined 2 instances, one when the app is opened and then one when an ICE agent asks a migrant for a check-in. But I want you to think about this. For many migrants out there, the logistics of going to an in-person check-in are very complicated. A lot of them don't have access to cars. ICE says that this eliminates that logistical challenge from the equation, and that's a key benefit.
What happens if someone loses their phone or doesn't comply in some way?
Yeah, well, we pressed ICE on this several times. They say that if somebody ditches the phone or they fail to check in, they are considered to be an absconder. That's the absconder rate that you saw in the piece, that less than 10%. And basically then the case is handed over to fugitive units for law enforcement. But look, we talked to experts. They say that these migrants have the ultimate goal of citizenship. They have every incentive to comply with this program. And so oftentimes many of them do.
And I assume ICE is just still trying to just make this better and better.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. But I also should point another solution that so many experts have pointed to, which is immigration lawyers. They say that we interviewed one expert from Syracuse University who tracks all of this data across ICE and all of the immigration system. He says that access to lawyers, immigration lawyers, has a 99% compliance rate. But there is one caveat here. More immigration lawyers are in short supply. You know, we have a shortage in this country. According to his data, only about 30% of immigrants in this country are able to have access to an immigration lawyer as it stands today.
Well, if the attorney's from Syracuse University, they're probably right. So I'll listen to that. Very interesting report, Tom. Thank you very much. We're going to move back now to the deadly wildfires burning across New Mexico. Thousands of acres have already been scorched, forcing hundreds of residents to evacuate their homes. Omar Villafranca has more on this.
One person has died as a result of this wildfire, but we do not know the circumstances just yet. We're talking about the South Fork salt fire that's burning behind me in the Ruidoso, New Mexico area. 23,000 acres have burned so far. And today we went behind the fire lines and we saw some of the damage. We saw homes that were burnt, also some businesses that had been there for decades. Cars, too, that were melted in parking lots of certain businesses that they were at. Crews were in position to fight this fire all day, and then we had some positive signs. We hope they're positive signs. A storm system formed in this area. For several hours, we had rain and we had some hail, but that's good and bad. Fire crews were worried that if the winds got too much, they could actually fan some flames, and they were really concerned with all the lightning that was coming down from the sky, because that lightning, of course, could start another fire. Now, we're not sure how much the rain helped these fires, which were 0% contained, but right now that has put us in a different situation. Now there is a flash flood emergency going on right now, so things are kind of in limbo right now, but we should find out if that rain helped contain these fires. Jeff?
Omar, thank you. Hundreds of people have died from heat in Saudi Arabia during the 5-day Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca. The Saudi government has not commented on the number of fatalities. However, diplomats have reported that at least 550 people from several countries have died. Temperatures reached as high as 125 degrees Fahrenheit at Mecca's Grand Mosque Monday. The Saudi General Authority for Statistics estimates that 1.8 million people are participating in this year's pilgrimage, which ends Wednesday. A cargo ship in the Red Sea sank Wednesday, 1 week after it was attacked by Houthi rebels. This marks the second time the Iran-backed group has sunk a ship along the popular trade route. Houthi militants have been launching missile attacks against ships in the Red Sea for months, saying their actions are in response to the Israel-Hamas war. At least one person is believed to have died in this latest strike. The U.S. Navy says it was able to evacuate 24 crew members. Global shipping companies released a joint statement after the attack, calling on countries with influence in the region to escort and safeguard commercial shipping vessels. A bipartisan group of U.S. lawmakers met with the Dalai Lama in India Wednesday. Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi was part of the delegation. She reaffirmed congressional support for the people of Tibet and criticized China's history of human rights violations. The visit comes as President Biden prepares to sign a bill that urges Beijing to resume negotiations with the Dalai Lama and Tibet leaders, which have been paused since 2010. The legislation also calls for the protection of Tibet's Buddhist culture. On Tuesday, the Chinese Foreign Ministry released a statement urging Biden not to sign the law and not to recognize Tibet as a part of China. It is officially the most valuable company in the world. Coming up, we'll look at what's behind the rapid success of NVIDIA and whether the computer chip maker can maintain its upward momentum. You're streaming the Daily Report.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Okay, let's go.
You guys good?
Hey.
All right, we good?
Keep going. The clock, it's ticking.
Off we go.
60 minutes.
60 minutes.
60 minutes.
It's time for 60 Minutes, Sundays on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education. Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides, Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Well, launched in 1993 as a tech startup developing advanced video game graphics, is now the most valuable company in the world. We're talking about NVIDIA. The California-based chipmaker has quickly made a name for itself as a leader in artificial intelligence processing. Tuesday, the company's market value surpassed that of Apple and Microsoft. Last year, NVIDIA's market cap hit $1 trillion. It is now above $3 trillion. So let's bring in Felix Salmon. He is the chief financial correspondent for Axios. Felix, thanks for your time. Is NVIDIA, is this all about artificial intelligence?
Yes, it's 100% an artificial intelligence story. This is not about NVIDIA selling chips for Xboxes and PlayStations. NVIDIA has really moved all in on this thing called the H100 chip, which is the chip that is driving OpenAI, Anthropic, all of those, XAI, all of these AI companies. And even Facebook is going out there just saying, we are just going to buy as many of these chips as we can, as they will let us buy at $100,000 a piece.
Felix, it's hard to turn on CNBC or read Axios or read the Journal these days, any day, without reading about NVIDIA. Does it have competitors?
So the interesting thing about NVIDIA is that we call it a chip maker, but it's not. It doesn't actually make the chips. The chips are made by TSMC in Taiwan, just like nearly all chips. And what it does is it designs the chips. It's got an architecture for AI chips that is incredibly state-of-the-art, and it does have some competitors on that front. Google is designing its own chips. Amazon is designing its own chips. And then there's one other chip maker, AMC, which is also in the race. But really, if you want to go out and buy chips and you're not Google or Amazon, there's only one game in town, and that's NVIDIA.
But so why is NVIDIA doing it better, or maybe they're not, but why have they been more successful in Google and Amazon and others?
Well, for one thing, Google and Amazon are not selling their chips, right? They're just making their own chips and using them in-house. If I want to buy a Google chip, I can't. If I want to buy an NVIDIA chip, I can. But also NVIDIA just has many years of putting the architecture together, building a whole ecosystem around it, and saying, if you want to do this kind of massively parallel processing that is inherent to artificial intelligence, this is what we're good at. This is what graphics processing units, this is what you needed to be able to do to create graphics video games back in the day. Turns out that that skill is exactly the skill that the generative AI large language models really need in order to be able to work.
I guess people have been wondering for a little while now if the NVIDIA bubble is going to pop, but I mean, it just keeps running up. Are there threats that you see?
I don't see it. I mean, eventually, possibly, I don't know, Intel, AMC, someone else is going to start making chips, but that's a few years down the road. Right now, NVIDIA does seem to have something of a lock on this particular part of the ecosystem. I think the main threat is how much demand is there going to be for these AI chips in the next few years. Right now, everyone expects the demand to just go up and up, that everyone is going to be wanting to buy as many as they possibly can, that they're pretty much price insensitive. That's been the story so far. But if the AI bubble starts to deflate a little, maybe some of those billions that are pouring into AI right now will no longer be around, and people just won't have the money to be able to afford these incredibly expensive chips.
Felix, I just talked to Ray Kurzweil, who is still predicting that AGI, artificial general intelligence, will hit in 2029. In other words, computers will be able to do everything that humans can. I assume that that's something that, I'm not sure if it's something you agree with or not, but or can say, but that's something that NVIDIA is banking on.
I think NVIDIA will be fine either way. Like, in a weird way, if you know the Borg, when Skynet takes over, who knows whether it's going to need NVIDIA or even going to pay NVIDIA. I think if we don't have an AGI, there's still going to be a lot of demand for AI chips.
Now, if you talk to Ray, he would say that don't bring up Skynet. He likes to talk positively about these things. He says Star Wars gets it right, but anyway, we can debate that more in the future. Felix, really appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Anytime.
All right. The baseball world is remembering a legend. Up next, more on the life of Willie Mays and how Major League Baseball is honoring his legacy. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
It's difficult right now to even try to explain to you how much I love baseball and how much baseball means to me. I think we had what you call a love affair.
Willie Mays, one of baseball's all-time great players, if not the greatest, died Tuesday at the age of 93. Mays began his career in 1948 playing in the Negro Leagues. He later joined the San Francisco Giants, the team he played for the longest, and the New York Mets at the very end. Mays was a 24-time All-Star, 2-time MVP, and of course a Baseball Hall of Famer. Earlier this month, he had 10 hits added to his Major League Baseball record after MLB decided to incorporate Negro League stats. Major League Baseball will honor Mays' life Thursday during a special regular season game at Rickwood Field in Alabama, where Mays got his start decades ago. CBS News' Major Garrett will be covering the game at Rickwood. He joins us now from Washington. Major, good to see you. Tell us why they're doing this at Rickwood and why it's so important.
Because Rickwood Field is the oldest baseball stadium in the country. It had and featured for decades both white baseball and black baseball, Negro League baseball. The Birmingham Black Barons played there and the Birmingham Barons played there. And Willie Mays learned baseball first from industrial leagues. And why is that important, Jeff? Because Birmingham is the most important city in the South that had nothing to do with the Civil War. It was created after the Civil War as an industrial city that made steel. Why? Because it had iron ore, coal, and limestone. And Willie Mays first learned about baseball watching his father, Cat Mays, play on industrial league teams in the Birmingham area. Willie Mays became a very good baseball player, was drafted by the Birmingham Black Barons, didn't play there very long, and as soon as Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier, he was brought to New York for the New York Giants. But he first started his professional career playing center field at Rickwood Field in Birmingham.
Major, I want to talk about on the field and off the field because they're both important when it comes to Willie Mays. First of all, on the field, it's the eternal debate. Who's the greatest baseball player of all time? Is it Babe Ruth? Is it Willie Mays? You could throw in Cy Young, Walter Johnson. Why do so many feel it's Willie Mays?
Because Willie Mays was the prototypical five-tool player. There are 5 tools that are valued above all others in professional baseball. Can you hit for average? Can you hit for power? Can you run well and steal bases? That's a third. Can you field well and can you throw well? Willie Mays did all of those things at a level of excellence never before seen. Ted Williams said, the Major League All-Star Game was invented for Willie Mays. Now, there is a statistic that people who really dig down in numbers in baseball use called win above replacement. How many games would your team win with you on it above an average player? Well, over the career, Willie Mays' number is 156. Babe Ruth's is 182. So Babe Ruth statistically better than Willie Mays. But don't forget this, Jeff. Willie Mays was drafted in 1952. He lost half of the Major League season in 1952 and all of the 1953 season for military service. You add back a year and a half of Major League Baseball, considering where his career trajectory was then, he might have come very, very close to Babe Ruth in that statistical category.
It's a very good point. There's also the way that Willie Mays carried himself off the field. There was a great quote I saw in The Athletic and the New York Times from a good Daniel Brown obituary today from Tallulah Bankhead, the stage and screen actress and Giants fan who famously said there are only 2 authentic geniuses in the world, Willie Mays and Willie Shakespeare. She said, but darling, I think you'd better put Shakespeare first. Brown says Mays' teammates would dispute that ranking. I think they dispute it not just based on what he did on the field, but the kind of teammate he was.
A great teammate, joyous personality. Say hey was the way Willie Mays was described, as the way he greeted everyone. Hey, how are you doing? A kind of ebullient and naturally infectious joy about playing baseball. However, it's worth noting that during the Civil Rights era, Willie Mays did not say very much, and he did not believe he should posture in any way politically in favor or against anything that was being debated in the civil rights struggle. Jackie Robinson criticized Willie Mays for that. Willie Mays said, the best thing I can do for my people is to play baseball well. He found in his career that the fastest way to silence people who would use racial epithets against him was to show him what a great baseball player he was. That was Willie's approach to dealing not only with racial hostility, but the larger world around him.
A legend. Major, I'm very jealous of your upcoming assignments, so have fun. I'll be watching. Thank you.
Thanks.
2 beluga whales have been rescued from an aquarium in Ukraine and relocated to Spain. 15-year-old male Plombier and 14-year-old female Miranda were forced to move due to bombings near their facility in Kharkiv. The attacks were so strong they caused waters in the beluga habitat to ripple. The 2 whales are now safely settling into their new, much larger home. Here are some of the stories we're covering in our next hour. We're following multiple weather threats this week, including the first named storm of the season and the extreme heat affecting millions of Americans. Plus, Russia and North Korea strengthen their ties with a mutual defense pact. We'll explain what it means as both nations face Western tensions. And 4 years after the pandemic started, long COVID has a new definition, how this could help some patients. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there